Ask 10 PC enthusiasts for advice, and you'll get 11 answers, at least. There's no real consensus of opinion on any topic within the PC sphere, but there sure are some opinions that will prove to be contentious or divisive. Some are simply... To gauge just how twisted my subscribers are, a few days ago I posted a question asking for their most unpopular PC tech opinions. I decided to share a few of the juicier morsels here for you all to pick apart, then give my own responses to them before I go ahead and share an unpopular opinion of my own. Shadow Racer kicks us off with this gem. In his opinion, the overwhelming majority of clear side panels look, quote, disgusting. As you've all seen my personal rig, you know I don't subscribe to this particular opinion. The last PC I had with a plain side panel was back in my wilderness years, and I had a f***ing atrocious Thermaltake case from about 2010. I look at the few decent cases available with solid side panels now, and I have to admit I find them pretty plain and uninspiring. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder and all that, and I appreciate the argument that a non-TG side can potentially give better airflow, but I'd rather have a PC I'm pleased with than compromise on aesthetics just to shave a couple of degrees off. If it were the difference between normal operation and thermal throttling, I might think differently, but as it is, I'm just not sure I agree with this one. Is this really an unpopular opinion? I'd say it's more contentious than anything. It's certainly what you might call a partisan issue, and you can pretty much make financial arguments for either platform. In the middle of the scalper pandemic, neither console nor PC wins value points, but it's still fair to say that PC owners pay more upfront for similar or better performing hardware. It's also fair to say that PC running costs are lower, and that games themselves are often cheaper on PC. In truth, I think PC diehards really don't care too much that the hardware costs more than the consoles. Most of us think the added expense is worth it. I, for one, can justify spending £1,000 plus on a PC I'll use for work, passive entertainment, creative applications and gaming. If I had a £500 console, I'd still need a £1,000 PC. If this opinion's unpopular, then it really shouldn't be. It doesn't take an economics professor to realise that if Ethereum takes a nosedive, or mining it becomes unprofitable, or cryptocurrency turns out to have all been a big bubble, the best option for miners is to sell off their ex-mining GPUs to gamers in order to recoup some of their losses. Lots of mining-specific cards, notably Nvidia Pascal-era models, are just conventional GPUs without DisplayPorts, which essentially throws that option away, and means you can really only reliably sell old cards to other miners. Even CMP cards that actually do have higher hash rates than consumer GPUs look like terrible value when you consider the lack of resale options. As for LHR cards, they're a band-aid solution to a problem Nvidia created themselves, but it does at least create an avenue for cheaper gaming cards in the short term. As for creating e-waste, come on. Everything we buy is eventually e-waste. I'm not going to disagree, but I am going to be pedantic about the word overrated. Sure, the gaming performance advantage of 8 to 16 core CPUs is disproportionate to their price. I don't think many people would disagree with that. And that kind of leads me to my point. I don't think there are actually a ton of influencers and journalists out there saying 8 plus core CPUs are a must-have for gaming, or even that they're the best option. I can think of more than a few channels who consistently champion the mid-range R5 and i5 CPUs of the current generation for gamers instead of a higher core model. Maybe console fanboys are out there shouting about their new 8-core processors. I don't really know, I don't go that side of the tracks these days, but I can't say that's really overrating. They don't have a lot of points of reference for comparison. Like all console owners, they get what they're given and like it. So yes, in summary, you are right that 6-core CPUs are currently sufficient, and that higher core counts just aren't good value for the benefit they bring. I just disagree with your wording. Alright, so we all know who the guy is on the Zoom call who's wearing his shirt and tie and boxers. Well, I mean, we all know we don't do it for the aesthetics. It's all about the extra FPS and the enhanced manhood, of course. In some extremely specific examples, yes. In many, many other examples, no. Maxwell V1 and 2 come to mind as examples of quadros that have a leg up in gaming compared to the GeForce equivalents. Core clocks on the K2200 and M2000 aren't far off the stock GeForce GTX 750 Ti and 950, and new feature branch studio drivers are updated about as frequently as game-ready drivers these days. Although the last couple of years have seen recommended VRAM requirements go ballistic, there's only a handful of games I can think of that don't really do well with less than 4 gigs. On the flip side, some of the later quadros, like the Pascal range, have massively lower clock speeds than the equivalent GeForces, and unless you can find some way of overclocking them, maybe with a custom BIOS, that's going to cripple their gaming performance far more than having only half the available VRAM would. I partially agree, though I'd add 2 benefits. Since switching to AIO water cooling in my personal PC, I've never even once had to worry about the height of my RAM's heat spreaders. And secondly, the slow time it takes my 280mm AIO to become heat saturated means that the fans don't have to ramp up and down in speed so often. It's probably true that I could use a big Noctua or Scythe or something instead without any real loss in performance, but at least for my own PC, I'm sticking with water for now. Yes, that's certainly going to be an unpopular opinion, and also brings up a bigger question. What, if anything, is right with cryptocurrency? I mean, okay, I get why it's a thing. After 2008, I can understand why people wanted to find a currency that didn't involve banks in any way, but on reflection, I can't help but think that entrusting it to people on the internet was a bad move. Cryptocurrency in 2021 seems to be represented by gamblers and con artists, and mining for these currencies just looks like using a vast amount of limited resources to enable them. So, while I don't intrinsically disagree with the existence of miners, and don't begrudge anyone using their money and time however they seem fit if it's how they earn a living, I think the answer miners give has to be, there is something wrong with mining, but I don't want to think about what that thing is. Well, nobody needs to do anything, but I take your point. The benefits of overclocking already high-performance processors, graphics cards, and RAM often seem more like bragging over having bigger numbers than actual measurable performance benefits, and modern components, especially graphics cards, do a perfectly good job of overclocking themselves. Ooh, plenty to unpack here. I think the key word is meaningful. Like, if you stop and gawp at the majesty of the graphics in a competitive shooter, you're likely to get yourself shot. Plenty of people actually turn settings down in online shooters, not only to improve performance, but to improve visibility of enemy players within a visually complex environment. I love Forza Horizon 5, but when I'm racing, I'm checking out the minimap and my racing line, so I don't really care too much about the astonishingly good visuals at the time. On the other hand, there are plenty of games where you really do get the opportunity to take in the scenery. I actually want to talk more about this. I think you've inspired me to do a graphics comparison video, 2012 versus 2022. Keep watching for that one once I've had some time to think about how exactly I'm going to approach it. To your second point, previously I'd have agreed with you, but titles like Battlefield 2042 and Halo Infinite might actually point to older 1080 cards becoming 900 or even 720 cards sooner than I'd like. Ironically, these are 2 titles that I really don't think look good enough to warrant their high system requirements. Thanks to my audience for supplying some fuel for this particular bonfire, and apologies, I ended up asking everyone individually for permission to use their answers in the video, so if I didn't get your permission slipped back from your parents, or your comment was similar to an earlier one, I'm afraid it wasn't featured here today. Let me know in the comments to this video if you have your own unpopular opinions, and if I get enough interesting material I might make a part 2 next year. Anyway, I teased at the beginning that I was going to share my own unpopular opinion. Well, actually, I'm going to share 2. The first is a bit more YouTube specific. You see, the P in 1080p is short for progressive scan. It was an alternative to 1080i, or interlaced. If you were buying TVs in 2012, you might need to know that the panel you're buying is only interlaced and not progressive scan, because that was a thing at the time. Your YouTube audience in 2021 doesn't need to know you're in 1080p, because there's no way in hell you're running PC games in 1080i. Hell, I don't even know if you can run a game in 1080i these days. Stop saying 1080p. It's not necessary. Sorry about that. I can tolerate a lot of injustices and horror in the world, but I will not tolerate people using more syllables than they need to. Anyway, my second unpopular opinion is one I think a lot more people will take issue with, and I'm actually dedicating a whole video to it. You see, I'm coming to the conclusion that certain well-known upscaling techniques are not just overrated, and I really mean overrated. I think they might be selling you snake oil. Look forward to that video in the near future. Thanks for watching this video. Kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.